Today's lesson is on the rhetorical situation, reading, listening, and viewing. Rhetoric is defined in the English 101 textbook Writer-Citizen as the intentional use of language or symbols to accomplish a specific goal with a specific audience. Rhetorical analysis involves looking at communication in a goal-oriented or purpose-driven and audience-focused way. Communication can be written, oral, or visual. The creator, when you are creating, you're writing, speaking, or communicating visually. When you're consuming, you're reading, listening, or viewing. There are three parts to communication. The writer or speaker or creator conveys the message. The audience or consumer receives the message, and the subject is what the message is about. These three parts of communication work together in the rhetorical triangle with the writer or creator, the audience or consumer, and the subject, all working together to create the message. The rhetorical triangle is a tool to help you think about and analyze the way we communicate. No matter what form of communication you choose to create or consume, written, oral, or visual messages, you must understand the rhetorical situation. Why? When you are the creator, you need to understand your rhetorical situation in order to convey your ideas effectively for your audience, in order to get them to agree with you. When you are the consumer, you need to understand the relationship between the three parts of the rhetorical triangle to understand the intent of the communication and get the most out of it. The rhetorical triangle includes three kinds of appeals identified by Aristotle to help you be persuasive. The three appeals attached to the three parts of communication. Writer or creator has ethos, the audience or consumer has pathos, and the subject has logos. The appeals are Greek words from Aristotle's time. Ethos are appeals based on the character, reputation, and expertise of the speaker or creator. Pathos is appeals based on the values and beliefs of the audience, or emotional appeals. And logos is appeals based on logic, reasoning, and facts or evidence about the subject. So here's a visual of everything we covered so far and the way the rhetorical triangle works together to create the message. We will focus on the rhetorical situation here as a consumer. When you are the consumer, you need to understand the relationship between the three parts of the rhetorical triangle to understand the intent of the communication and get the most out of it. Every communication, such as a professor's email, a textbook chapter assigned by your professor, a newspaper article, an op-ed, or visual or audio message, has an audience-focused purpose for the communication. The message must be clear so that the audience understands what they should think or do after reading or receiving it. This is purpose. Use the rhetorical triangle to help you identify how a writer or creator tailors their communication, the message, to a specific audience. Consider what sources the writer uses to bolster or borrow ethos, source credibility if needed. When you think of purpose, think of pie. Writers want to change the reader, either their thinking, behavior, or both. P, persuade readers. I, inform readers. E, entertain readers. What was the purpose of linking this image with the rhetorical purpose, or pie? Even visuals have purpose. The visual here triggers several learning styles, oral, visual, and sensory, if you can almost smell that pie. The next time you read, listen to, or view something, you will think of this delicious pie, and the acronym will help trigger the reasons we communicate. Persuade, inform, entertain, pie. Every communication has an audience-focused purpose, so let's think. You're listening. A friend is trying to persuade you to stop doing homework and hang out. Hopefully they don't succeed in their persuasion. Viewing, you're looking at an advertisement or a comic or a video assigned by your professor. So each one of those viewing experiences have different purposes. The advertisement is trying to sell you something. The comic, I hope, is trying to entertain you. And a video assigned by your professor must be something that they want you to learn or remember. What about reading? You're reading your chemistry textbook or an article in the Torch convincing the UMD community to stop littering. The Torch is the UMass Dartmouth student newspaper. So we assume that your chemistry professor wants you to actually learn the chapter that they've assigned, right? If you're reading an article in the Torch, they're obviously trying to help stop littering from happening on campus. There is always an audience-focused purpose for communication. Every communication has an audience-focused purpose, but you have to make sure you understand as the audience what the creator expects you to think or do after reading, viewing, or listening to the communication. If it is an assignment for a class, make sure you understand why your professor assigned the reading, the video, or the audio file, and what your professor expects you to learn or understand after completing the assignment. So let's do a little practice one. Here's a little ad, and I'll read it to you, and we're going to think about what the purpose of the ad is. Why love one but eat the other? In the upper right, it says go vegan. Choose compassion, go vegan. To find out more and order your free vegan starter kit, visit www.govegan.org.nz. So is this advertisement with this little chick sitting on a kitten, is it meant to persuade you to do something, inform you of something, or entertain you? Well, let's think about which appeal is the strongest. Is it ethos, the brand or company who created it? So Go Vegan created it. I would say that their brand is pretty low level here. You know, it's in the upper right, tiny, and it's at the very bottom with the web address. So it's definitely not ethos. Is it pathos? Emotional appeals with the fuzzy little kitten and the fuzzy little chick. Why love one but eat the other? So yeah, it's definitely pathos. They're pulling on your heartstrings to make you see that it's, you know, crazy to eat any cute little fuzzy thing. And there's a little bit of logic here too. The why love one but eat the other is a logical appeal that it doesn't make sense for you to eat one or the other. So let's practice another purpose here. Here's a comic book, and it says there's three frames. Reading social media all day is making me grumpy. Why don't you go outside? Fine. Now there's glare on my screen. So what's the purpose of this comic book? Right? Is it meant to persuade you to do something, inform you of something, or entertain you? It's definitely meant to entertain you, right? Because it's funny that the little girl goes outside with her computer so that she's not stopping herself from being grumpy because reading social media all day is making her grumpy. She's still doing it only outside. So that's funny. But it's also persuading you that we should all take a break from our computers and, you know, do something else. Go outside. Be hungry. You should always understand the intended purpose for you as a consumer. Reading without understanding purpose is like going to a restaurant when you don't want anything to eat or drink. You'll get nothing out of it. Or worse, you will not get what you were expected to get out of it by your professors. Now that we've seen how communication is influenced by the rhetorical situation and purpose, let's review with a focus on reading for class. So here's the slide again that talks about the rhetorical situation and the three parts of communication and the three appeals, just to remind you, right? So if you're reading for class, think about the writer and ethos. Consider these questions before you read and while reading. Who wrote this? Why should you care what the writer has to say, right? Is the writer an expert on the subject? Why does the writer care about the subject? Why should you? Does the writer use credible sources? So that is especially important if you're reading like a newspaper article where it's written by a reporter. That reporter needs to draw on the expertise of experts, right? They have to quote credible sources on the topic that they're reporting on. So what about audience or pathos? Consider these questions before you read and while reading. Are you the intended audience? If not, who is? So for your textbooks, for math, for chemistry, for history, for philosophy, when you're reading a textbook, you are the intended audience, right? Aside from the textbook, most likely you're not the intended audience. So if you're reading a newspaper article, who reads that newspaper? Is it a conservative publication like the Wall Street Journal or a liberal publication? like the New York Times. So you need to understand who the intended audience is so that you can look at how the appeals are working for that audience. And often that audience will not be you. So audience knowledge, consider the knowledge base you bring to the assigned reading. What does your professor expect you to learn? What does your professor expect you to know or be able to do after reading? So if you're reading a textbook, they expect you to understand and learn the chapter, right? Because this is college. It's not like you read it and then you go in and they teach it. It's you read it and you learn it and then they talk about the next thing. So if you're having trouble with a textbook, you should either A, practice the questions at the end of the chapter, practice the equations if it's math or something like that. And then if you need to, go to the STEM Center and get some online tutoring. Audience values. Consider what you value. Why are you reading this? To get a good grade? To learn something? Both. And then if you're not the intended audience, audience values. Why are they reading that? And do they agree with the topic? Disagree? You know, is the writer trying to persuade them of something, or are they already on the side of the writer? Audience beliefs. Consider your beliefs about the topic or the intended audience. Are you interested in the subject? Will the reading agree with your opinion on the subject if you have one? Will you be persuaded to agree or care? So reading for class subject logos. Before, evaluate your understanding of the subject. What do you already know? What do you need to know? What do you need to fill in the holes of your comprehension? During your reading, determine, is the evidence appropriate to support your needs as a reader? Are the sources used credible? How do you know? If it's a textbook, are the practice examples effective? After you've read, evaluate. What do you still need to understand in order to learn what is expected by your professor? How will you learn what you need to in order to gain understanding? So use your professor's office hours. If you're not sure of the purpose of the assignment, find out. Am I supposed to learn all of this? Like, am I just supposed to have an opinion on it? What's the goal here, right? So make sure that you understand why your professor is assigning something and that you get out of it what you need. Go to their office hours if you don't, email them if you don't understand the assignment, and use the STEM Center for tutoring. Rhetorically analyze what you are consuming: textbooks, additional readings, videos, PowerPoints, podcasts, and recorded lectures. Analyze before, during, and after you read, watch, and listen. Be sure you get out of what your assignments, what your professors expect. Review the slideshow and get comfortable with the information presented. I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope that you will use what you've learned here to more effectively complete assignments during your college career, but also more effectively read critically when you're online, looking at a news site or looking at comments, things like that. So if you're reading math or chemistry or engineering, professor assigns a chapter in a textbook to read, you can assume that you're expected to learn that material, right? If you're watching English 101, professor assigns a TED Talk for you to watch, like I might, you can assume that I expect you to take notes on that, perhaps print out and annotate the transcript, analyze the rhetorical situation, and understand not just what the lecture is about, but who the lecturer is speaking to, what the audience values, what the purpose of the communication is. And if you're listening, if any professor lectures on a topic in class or online, they expect you to be taking notes. They expect you to learn what they're lecturing on. And if you're face-to-face, they're expecting you to ask questions. And if you're online, I'm sure they expect you to ask questions in an online discussion or during their office hours if needed. That's all for today. I hope you've got the rhetorical situation in you. As a consumer, you need to think about who the creator is, who the intended audience is or consumer, and what the subject is and how those are working together to create the message. All right, good luck in your classes. Bye for now.